Okay, so we're going to talk today, instead of Parsha, we're going to talk about Chanukah, the miracle of Chanukah, which we can all use more miracles right now. So we know that the miracle of Chanukah happened against the Greeks, and we know that they finally were able to consecrate the Beit HaMikdash, which had been defiled, and they looked for some pure oil, pure cruise, and all that they could find was one pure cruse of oil, and this cruse of oil lasted and it lit for 8 days until they were able to remake the pure oil again. So this is the miracle of Chanukah, and there's so many ramifications to it, which we're going to be talking about, but today we specifically wanted to focus a little about the woman's role in Chanukah. So anyone have any ideas, what is the woman's role in Chanukah?
Make latkes.
Are you talking about real life or in the Torah?
Well, in the historical events, what happened?
She was able to kill Sisera.
Hannah.
Hannah
V'Shivat.
No, Yehudis.
Yehudis. Okay, good. So you're mentioning Yehudis, you're mentioning Hannah, which we'll talk about. Anything else?
Who else?
So interestingly, not everyone realizes this, but the whole war started as a result of a woman. What happened? And her name was actually also Hannah, and she was a sister of the Maccabees who started the war. What happened? So picture this: you have a beautiful wedding, all set up, all beautiful, all ready to get. The bride is beautiful in her beautiful white gown, and just as she's standing in front of a room full of guests, and this woman who's a very dignified, the daughter of the high priest and one of the sisters of all the Maccabees, and she rips open her gown and reveals herself to the crowd, to all these important dignitaries. And you can imagine her brothers were like quite embarrassed, like, what are you doing? And like, why are you doing something like that? And she says to them, you're embarrassed by what I just did? But why are you not embarrassed by what's going to happen to me tonight? What's going to happen to me tonight? The Greeks had a thing that the governor got what was called first rights. That means that the governor got the bride, that he got first rights to the bride. And she called attention to this. You see, what was happening with the Greeks is the Greeks had stopped the Jewish people from doing a lot of the mitzvot. So they stopped them from keeping Shabbat. So the Jewish people kept Shabbat in secret. They stopped them from learning Torah. So what do? The kids were playing, and this is why we play with the dreidels today, because the kids were like playing with as soon as a Greek person came, they pretended they were playing with the dreidels. They hid Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, all these things that they stopped. Brit Milah, they did it in hiding. Undercover. Similarly to what was going on in Russia, we could say Inquisition, exactly, like the Inquisition, or like in communist Russia. I mean, my mother tells stories about how all these things were being done. It was being done with closed doors. No one knew what they were doing behind closed doors. Even for Shabbat, she tells she would act like she had a broken hand, like a broken finger, and her father would bribe the teacher not to tell anything, and she would come with a bandage so she wouldn't have to write on Shabbat.
Oh, wow.
Or she would say how she would go to this park with her father at the beginning of the day, but it looked like she was wearing her school clothing, and she's walking with her father as if they're walking to school, and they would hide the whole day in the park. And then when the school children were coming out, they would leave the park so no one would say. Like every week it was something else. Wow. It was some other story of what they would do. So similarly, and in a different context, I mean, we look at Jewish history, and it's incredible. Everything that we're doing today, we've suffered the exact same thing. No right to exist, no right as our people, no right to our, everything has been, we've been going through it over and over and over all these years. It's nothing new. So this is what was happening in from the Greeks in the land of Israel during the time period right before Chanukah. And so this sister of the Maccabees turned to them and she said, okay, every other thing we hide from. But this is going to happen to me tonight. You're embarrassed for me to open my dress, but what about what is actually going to happen? You need to be like Shimon and Levi, who we learned about, who took revenge for Dinah's rape when she was raped, and they killed out the whole city. They killed out the whole city of Shechem. You need to be like that. And when the brothers heard her words, sometimes it takes the wisdom of a woman who says it with such passion and such emotion. They heard of what she said and they said, "You're right. We're going to start this uprising, this revolt." And it was very few in the hands of very many, and they didn't have the equipment, they didn't have the mechanism, but they went out with such passion to really, because this is how they needed to defend themselves. And that is what started the entire uprising of the Jewish people against the Greeks, which finally culminated in the miracle. So that was the first woman who is involved in this whole revolt, which is what caused the revolt. You also mentioned a woman by the name of Yehudis, which is also my name. My name is Chana Yehudis, who was a very brave woman, this Yehudis. She was a widow. Yehudit. Yes, Yehudit, I'm sorry.
Because you said Yehuda.
Yehudis, yes, Yehudit.
I'm sorry.
So she lived in a town that was under siege, the town of Betulia. I'm not sure where it was, but the town of Betulia, which was under siege. And it was under siege by the Greek governor, whose name was Holofernes. And he was ruthless, and he decided he's going to just make a siege around this town and drain them out of their food and their water, and in this way the people will give in. And he was a ruthless murderer, ready to kill all of them. And the people in the town were feeling more and more hopeless as time went by, because it wasn't rainy season in the land of Israel. There's only certain times, like when we pray for rain, we pray for rain because in the land of Israel, this is when rain falls. It wasn't rainy season. And if it wasn't rainy season, then there was no water. There would be no water for them to drink. And there would be no plants for the growth of their wheat and the grains. There wouldn't be. And they were running very, very low. People were starving. And the people were saying, let's already give in to Holofernes. Let's give defeat. Let's admit defeat. And the officer, his name was Uzziah, he was trying to prolong it because he knew if we fall into the hands of Holofernes, it would be terrible. It would be brutal. He would kill mercilessly. But on the other hand, people were saying that's better than dying a slow starvation. So it was a very, very difficult situation. And finally, they're all gathered and they're demanding from him, let's just give in. And he says to them, give us 5 more days. Let's try to pray for 5 more days to God, and God will answer us surely within 5 days. He was just basically trying to prolong it. And this woman, Yehudit, heard what he said, and she stayed after everyone left. They agreed to 5 more days, and she stayed, and she approached Uzziah, and she says, how is it that you can say that? Are you giving God a time limit of when, and how can we admit defeat? How can we give in to this ruthless person who knows what he'll force us to do? And he says, but what should I say? The people are getting so hopeless. They're feeling so defeated that I can't even, convince them any longer. And she says to him, I have a plan. And he says, okay, tell me your plan. And she tells him her plan. And her plan involves her going out. She goes out of the city gates, the walls of the city. And right outside was obviously Holofernes' people. And they say to her, what do you want? And she says, I have a message to say to Holofernes. She was a widow, and she was beautiful. Her husband had just passed away very recently. She was beautiful. She went with one of her maids, who was with her at all times. And she says, I have a message to give over to Holofernes. It's a very important message. And somehow they were intrigued by her beauty and her courage and her charisma, so they let her go up to Holofernes, and he's like, what do you want? And she says, I have a message for you. You want to come into the town, but I'm telling you the people are very hopeless. There's less and less supply, but they still have faith in God. And the only way that you will be able to defeat them once they have faith in God, God listens to them. The only way that you can defeat them is if they start eating non-kosher animals, because then God will no longer protect them. And he says, okay. And she says, so let me go every day. Let me try to go back to the camp and judge what the atmosphere is like, because I'm telling you, like they're at the brink of that. They're so starving that they're at the brink of that. And once that happens, you'll be able to get them. And he was like intrigued by her charisma and her courage. And he said, okay. He told his soldiers around him, let this woman stay here near my tent, stay in the camp and walk freely. No one should dare anyone harass her in any way. Let her go through the camp. And the first night she went back and she went to she gave a message to Uzziah that everything is going as planned. And she came back and she says to Holofernes, we're almost there. And then the second night, the same thing. She went back to the gates with her maidservant and they came back and she says, yeah, they're getting really, really desperate. And already by day 3, he's getting very itchy, this Holofernes. And he's like, I don't want to wait any longer. She says, I'm telling you, one more day and that it will be fine. He says, okay, tomorrow I'm making a feast and I want you to come. And you're going to come to the feast and it will just be me and you in anticipation, because he's sitting around doing nothing. He's getting very restless. And she says, okay, no problem. And the next day she goes to him, to his tent, and he's just there with her, and he's planning on having
a feast.
A feast, exactly. Exactly. And he brings out all these foods that he made, and she says, no, I made special foods for you. I'm known throughout the land for making delicious cheeses, and I brought you my cheeses, and I brought you my wine that I made. And the wine was very strong wine, and the cheese was very salty cheese, and she kept giving him the salty cheese and the wine, and he kept drinking and eating, until finally he fell into this drunken stupor, and he falls asleep. And that was when this brave woman, Yehudis, who was not a warrior in any form or shape, she takes his shield, his sword that was on him. She removes it from its cover and she prays to God. She says, just like Yael did in the biblical story. Remember, everything in history is like a repeat. Just like she killed Sisera, the general who was harming the Jewish people. Now, please give me the courage to also kill. And she cuts off his head with the sword and takes his head and puts it into her bag. I guess she had a lovely big bag. Always travel with big bags. and walks with her, gathers her maidservant, collects her maidservant, and walks back to the gates of the city. And of course, the people are used to seeing her. They've already seen her for the first night, the second night. This is the third night. They let her go freely. She goes into the city and tells Uzziah, I have a prize for you, but you must attack quickly because they don't even know that he's dead. And once they see him, they're going to run away in fear. And this is exactly what happened. They were able to put his head up so that the people would see it, and they attacked them. And the people were, the army of the Greeks completely ran away, and they defeated them. So that was another story that we see. Another story that we hear about is Hannah and her 7 sons. And this story is a very, very sad story. But it just, again, it shows the attitude of the people against who hate us, the attitude of people over the centuries, over and over and over again, who hate us. So the Greek Antiochus called for Hannah and her 7 sons, and he wanted to show that her sons would bow down to his idols. And he takes the first son, and the first son is, I'm not going to bow down. I believe only in God and God alone and God in the Torah. And the king is furious. He says, you chutzpah, this you impudent person. And he says, let's cut off his tongue and his hands and his feet. And they burn it in front of his other brothers, and they're forced to watch as he's tortured. And that doesn't deter any of his other brothers. The next one comes forward and they kill him, and the next one and the next one. And they keep on saying to the king, you know, we are serving God and God alone. We will not serve or bow down to your idols. And then finally it comes to the youngest one, who's just a young child of 7. And at this point, the king says to Hannah, go speak to your youngest son and convince him, and then I'll save him and you. This is your youngest child. And she says to the king, give me a moment with him in privacy. And she takes him out and she says to him, you know, I nursed you for 9 months and I trained you and I raised you, and we only believe in one God, the God of the heavens, and he's the only one that has any power over us, and glorious will be the reward for you when you only serve God and God alone. And the child says, I'm not planning on bowing down to the idol at all. And they go back into the king's chamber, and she says, I tried, but I couldn't convince him. And the king says to this young 7-year-old boy, okay, I'm going to make it easy for you. I'll just put my signet ring on the floor, and you just have to pick up my ring, but it will look like you're bowing down to the idol. And I'll let you do that. And the son says, there's no way, no way. And again, I believe only in one God, in the God of Israel. I only serve the Torah, and I don't compromise my principles for someone like you, and woe to you, what awaits you. And again, they torture this youngest one of hers and kill him. And after her sons were all tortured and killed, she says to them, when you go up to these dead bodies, she says, when you go up to heaven, you'll see Abraham, our father, and tell Abraham he was ready to sacrifice one child, one son of his, and I sacrificed all 7 of mine. And this very sad, horrific story, but
then she jumped.
And then she jumped. She kills herself. Exactly. She kills herself. And these are the stories of the women in the Chanukah story. Whenever we look back to any point in Jewish history, every single holiday, it was always the women who have an integral part. You know, whether it be for Pesach, we see with Miriam, with the tambourines, with the courage that she had, whether it be Purim with Esther, it's always the women who had that strength, that conviction, and that power of faith in God, and this unwavering power, and also the ability to motivate people to do what was right, to motivate, like the sister of the Maccabim, who was able to motivate them in doing something very surprising, but she motivated them to actually start the war and saying, how can we continue living like this? This is not right. So as a result of these things, the common law is in the Torah that when we light the menorah, there's a special place for women. When the menorah is lit, the women don't do work. We don't do any work while the menorah is lit. Just the women have that special added custom that we don't do any work while the candles are lit. We just sit and absorb the message of the candles. We should absolutely do it the whole year. It's kind of like Rosh Chodesh is also considered a holiday for the women, where we're not supposed to do specific work on that holiday, like laundry or other things that we don't do, because it's a holiday that's given specifically for women. So this, while the candles are lit, the women, in recognition for these powerful, courageous women, we don't do work. We just absorb the message, and we absorb the message of our power, of what we are made out of, how we are the ones that bring the families together, and not only bring our families together, but we imbue them with the message of the light, the message of the light of the candles. What is the message of the light of the candles? It's dark outside, it's cold, it's winter time, and yet the candle is burning. We say, no matter how much we have gone through as a Jewish people, generation after generation, century after century, they try to snuff us out, whether it be through the wind or through the through the water or through the sand, whatever it is, they try to just snuff out these candles, to snuff out the light of Judaism, to snuff out who we are, the light of our people, the light of what we are, whether it be through assimilation or whether it be through good, trying to do it in a good way, or through persecutions. It's all the same. They try to snuff out this Yiddish neshama, which is like the flame, this beautiful soul of the Jewish people. They can't stand to see the light shining brightly. And we've seen it century after century, generation after generation. Sometimes it was with kindness, like Mitzrayim. At the beginning, Paro was like, whatever you build for me, I'll pay you so much money. And then it ended up in horrific slavery. Or whether it was in communist Russia, or whether it was the Germans and Nazi, and whether it was the Inquisition, whatever it was, throughout the generations, we've had this non-stop. People, or whether it's today, where they don't want to even realize our existence because our very existence is threatening. They take this light that we are, the candle that we are, and they try to snuff it out. And what we do is, by lighting that menorah, is we're saying, this light is eternal. This light is not going to be extinguished. It's little, it's small, it's not this glorious, glamorous light, but we put it in the window or we put it in the doorway to bring our light, the light that we have, to let it shine out to the world, to shine out to everybody. We're sharing with the world our light, but we're standing there no matter what we say, no matter what everyone wants of us, we're ready to just shine our light to the world. And this is true on a cosmic level as the Jewish people. This is who we are, this is what we are. And this is also the message on a personal level for each of us. Challenges, darkness, difficulties are all around us. You know, we say, on the one hand, this is on a cosmic level, the Jewish people versus society versus the world around us. But this is also true on a personal level, how each of us feels sometimes like we're being snuffed out. Our light is not being able to shine. Whether it be the challenges in our lives, the difficulties that we're going through, whether it be a health issue, whether it be a livelihood issue. We all, in today's times, you look around you and you see people who are bent over from all the difficulties that we go through. And we say, no matter what, we are finding our light, we are finding our fire, we are finding our faith, we are finding our emunah, our faith in God, because we know that this is who we are. And sometimes, you know, and we've asked this question before in this class, like, what if everything is so horrible? I mean, I had a woman call me up and she says, you know, she had a lot of situations in her life. She's like, what is my mission in life? You know, what is my mission supposed to be? Challenges with her children, challenges with her spouse, challenges how. She says, what am I supposed to be doing? And sometimes the only thing that you're supposed to be doing is just to continue shining your light, not to solve the darkness. You can't solve the darkness. You're just your own light, but you can continue just shining your light, just being who you are, just going through what you're going through. That alone is victory, because it's easy to succumb to the darkness. It's easy to say, I have no mission. I have no purpose. I don't know what my thing is, what I'm supposed to be doing. There's darkness and challenges all around me. I'm just going to give up. It's easy to say that. And the point of the Chanukah lights is, no, we're going to believe in God. We're going to shine our light. We're going to shine who we are. We're going to continue on, even if that is just continuing on. Even if that just means I'm not solving all the issues that I have with my children, with my family, with my livelihood, with my health issues. I'm just going to keep on being who I am, one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. And maybe, you know, sometimes we think like we have to overcome the challenge. And if we don't, we failed. Maybe the fact that you're still fighting 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, maybe that's the challenge. Not to overcome it, not so that the issue goes away, because sometimes the darkness is overwhelming, but to live with that challenge and still be you, to still maintain your sanity to still get up every morning, to still get dressed every morning, to still put on your shoes every day. Maybe that is your overcoming. Maybe that is your success. Just doing that. And that's what the Chanukah menorah teaches us. You just light it. There's still darkness outside. There's still overwhelming darkness. But you've done your part. You're still surviving. You're still lighting your light. And of course, the hope is that every day you increase in light. You know, you start with one light and then you're able to light another light. And the truth is, mitzvah goreres mitzvah. When you do one mitzvah, when you do one good deed, it gives you the strength to do more. You know, when you're feeling so overwhelmed and you just feel like, I just can't, they say, just get up. Just get up. Just go and make yourself some scrambled eggs, something for breakfast. Make yourself something. Get up and do something. Go around the corner. Go around the block. Smile to somebody. And you'll see all these acts that you're doing help you to get stronger, to be more, to become more. And that's the hope, that we light one light the first night, and the hope is that the next light you'll be able to light another light, and the next light another light, until finally all 8 lights are lit. But then look at the situation. Okay, so I'm lighting all 8 lights, and you might say to yourself, okay, I'm lighting 8 lights, but look at the darkness outside. There still is that darkness. I'm doing everything I can, but there still is the darkness. But you've just vanquished the darkness because you've lit your light every night, because you've gone through your situation every day and you've given it your all, and that's all that's demanded of you. You've passed your test of life by just being who you are. And it doesn't have to be this big victory, but just by doing that, you've passed your test. And the same as us as the Jewish people, you know, we think that sometimes we have to be the perfect nation and the perfect Jew. Just by doing who you are, just by being who you are, just by being proud to be a Jew and trying every day just to do a little bit of something, a little mitzvah, a little bit of connection, that is you shining your menorah, your candle to this world.
Oh, this is yeah, the Jews say, or lagoim.
Or lagoyim, 100%. And sometimes we see it and sometimes we don't, you know. When you take a step back, you can see it. You can see it happening, like in history. You can see that the world is progressing. But when you're in it, you don't see it and you just feel like there's so much darkness. And that's okay. You know, that's okay. And you know, I was just thinking about some of the, thank you, you asked that question once. You said like, but what happens if you're not, like you're not succeeding? Or what happens if, you know, the person is not getting better or it's not working? And just try, like I was thinking, just trying every single day. That's the point. That is the point.
But even like as the nation of the Jewish nation, we love each other so much that it's very painful.
Yes.
So yes, you're saying
Yes.
all this, but you know, watching the children suffer in Israel and
100%.
watching what they're going through, watching what the anti-Semitism here, it becomes even more painful for us because we have such a deep connection for each other.
Absolutely.
That it's very, very hard. So yes, you keep on going, but the pain doesn't,
100%.
You know, it you
Cannot.
can't get rid of it.
No.
And it makes
And
it very hard.
you're not supposed to get rid of the pain.
Yeah.
You know, you're not supposed to not feel that pain. You're supposed to feel the pain. You're supposed to see the darkness, you know, around us. Like, don't kid yourself when you light the menorah and think, oh, I just made it so light. No, you lit your light and you did what you're supposed to do. It's still overwhelmingly dark all around you, but you've done your part. And that's
as human beings, we always want to know why, and we always
100%.
want to know, like,
Right.
you know, we always ask questions like, how could this happen?
right.
And I think living with it is very difficult.
Yeah. 100%. And that's the test of humanity, of being a human being.
Yeah.
That's really the test. And the test is that contradiction, feeling the pain while still continuing. Like, if you don't feel the pain, then there's no challenge, but then you're not a human being. You know, and so the point is feeling that pain, feeling that empathy for those around you and feeling it deeply, and yet, okay, so I'm just going to do my part. I'm going to continue. I'll do whatever I can. I'll do another mitzvah. I'll bring the light into the world, But my point is just to continue being. That is the test. That's the ultimate test. Now, when we look at the word for Greek, is the word in Hebrew is Yavan. And that's what Greeks mean. So what was it? What was it about Greek culture that was so infatuating, even to some Jews? There was the Mityavnim, which was the Jews who became like the Greeks. What was the Greek culture? What was it signifying? What was the meaning of the Greek culture?
Oh, the human perfection of the human body.
The human body, that's true. And what does that mean, the perfection of the human body?
They're outside. Everything is outside and surface, and not anything inside at all. Because that's what Jews do.
Right.
Outside, the perfected image.
Exactly, yes. So it's interesting. I just read today, actually, an article on Chabad.org that said the word for face comes from the word facade. That, it's something like on the outside, you're putting up this face to the world, this facade of who I am. And we smile to the world. And in today's generation, all the more so, we're the Instagram, TikTokers generation. How many followers we have and showing this perfection to the world. And, we put up this facade of who we are. It's all about the outside. The word in Hebrew for face is panim. And panim comes from pnimiot, the inside. So in Judaism, it's all about the inside, who we are, the pnimiot. The face is really a mirror for the inside. The eyes are like the soul, the mirror to the soul, the window to the soul. It's about pnimiot, the inwardness, the innerness of who we are. That the inwardness shows on the outside. The outside and the inside are in unison. It's not this facade that we're putting up to the world. And that's really the idea of when we light the menorah, we're taking it and lighting it in the window or in the doorway. What are we saying? We're saying we're bringing our innerness to the outside. We're overflowing with that innerness of who we are, that truth, that morality of who we are, and we're shining it to the world. We're bringing it into the world. So part of the Greek culture was very much the outside. But what did they hate about Judaism? What did they hate about Jewish religion?
The conscience.
The conscience.
The loyalty to the faith.
The loyalty to the faith, yes. In other words, the Greeks felt it's fine to have culture. They were full of culture. They were full of the Olympics and the culture and the body, and there was a lot of culture. So why did they resist our culture? Shabbat is a beautiful thing. Shabbat, you get together with family, you eat beautiful, delicious foods, delicious meals. What's wrong with that? Our holidays are cultural, beautiful cultural events. The Jewish culture is a very rich culture. I mean, along with everything else that it is, but it's a very rich culture that celebrates so much of our history, so much of our past, so much of who we are. It's a culture.
But it's more spiritual.
Yes, that was the point that they hated. They said, you can have your culture, you can have family gatherings, on Shabbat, but don't do it because this is a divine thing. You can do it out of culture. You can do it because it's beauty. It's beautiful. It's this outwardly beautiful thing, but don't connect it to a divine wisdom. Don't do it because this is what God wants of you. Do it because you enjoy the family gathering, but don't do things that are irrational, that don't make sense, that are divinely given. That they couldn't stand. And we see this even in the word Yavan. So the word Yavan is a little yud, and the little yud resembles wisdom. Yud stands for wisdom. And why is it standing for wisdom? It's that little flash of wisdom that comes into your head. That little idea, that little yud of wisdom that comes into your mind. Now, usually in Judaism, the yud also stands for God, because that flash of wisdom is connected to God. We connect it to God. But in the Greek philosophy, it was devoid of godliness. It was devoid of the divine. It was just wisdom for the sake of wisdom, and wisdom that was celebrated because it's wisdom. wisdom that was celebrated because this is beautiful, this is culture, this is something that's on the outside, something that we can celebrate, but not because it's connected to the divine. So what happened to that wisdom? And even some Jews got into this trap of looking at it in that way. So the Yud is followed by then a Vav. The Vav, it resembles, the number Vav is 6, numerically 6. And that goes into the midot of the person. There's 6 different midot. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. The 6 different emotional characteristics. So what happens with this wisdom?
Can you say that again?
Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. Tiferet.
I'm sorry.
No, good. Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. So these are the 6 Kabbalistic things. That's why we say that there's 6 days of the week. It resembles these 6 different parts of how we go about interacting with the world, that we're running around and doing and interacting with these 6 different parts of the world. There's also 6 different directions: north, south, west, east, up, down. 6 different directions in a 3-dimensional world. Right? And then the 7th is the Shabbat, like that permeates all of them. And the 7th actually resembles the women. But the 6 are the 6 different emotional parts of us. So what happens is we take this wisdom and we bring it into our emotions, how we understand the wisdom, what parts we want to understand and apply to the wisdom. We make it subjective, like what is your truth? Have you heard that expression today? What is your truth? There is not a truth.
No.
It's your truth, your subjective truth. This is common nowadays. What is your truth? And everyone has their own truth, meaning how do you see things? How do you see reality? What is your pronoun? How do you identify? What do you see for yourself? How do you identify with what just happened? And if you if you identify as a cat, so you're a cat, I mean, this is today common.
Really is.
Unfortunately,
Right.
it's about your truth, your subjective truth, not the objective truth. So you're taking that Yud, the wisdom, which should be the objective wisdom, the wisdom of God. That's what Yud should be. It should be the wisdom of God, and then how we apply that wisdom into our lives. Instead, you're taking that Yud, that wisdom, and you're distorting it by subjecting it to your 6 particular emotional qualities, how you want to see it, your subjective view of it, how you want to relate to that wisdom, what you want to do with that wisdom. And what happens when we corrupt wisdom like that, when there is no objective truth, there is no divine truth, there is no divine being who's telling us how to behave, but it's how I want to behave, what I think is moral, what I think is right, the way that I want to relate to this world. When we do that, we then get to the last letter, which is the long nun, the nun sophit, or the longa nun, which that goes beyond, if you're writing it on a line, so this nun goes all the way down, meaning it's dragging beyond the plane of morality. It's going into this sphere where there's no morality anymore. It's dragging all the way down. And this is what happens when we take that Yud, that wisdom, and we apply it only to what we think, how I understand it, that there's no objective truth, but it's all about me and how I want to interpret it. Then it goes all the way down to total immorality.
But this is what we call the Greek.
Yes.
So why do we give them so much, wisdom? And I don't understand.
Why
did we call them Yavan?
Well, any Hebrew word
Yes.
represents something. It represents, that's the power of the Hebrew language. That it's not just, like we said, the word panim is panimiot.
Yeah,
So the word itself shows you what they're made out of. It's taking wisdom, which they had wisdom. They had, if you look at all philosophies, Aristotle, all the
Yes.
philosophies,
Yeah.
and all these, they had a lot of wisdom.
Yes.
which could have been beautiful. It could have a lot of culture, a lot of wisdom, a lot of philosophies.
But they didn't take it into good
Instead
action.
of taking it into
Oh,
divine
I
moral
see.
actions,
I
they're
see.
bringing it down into subjectiveness,
I see.
which brings it down even further into the worst places of
Oh, I see.
immorality.
Okay.
And even so, what happens with
That's
that
interesting.
is that when you take wisdom and you corrupt it like that, then they didn't even have wisdom because they also were sacrificing to idols. So that didn't even make sense. They're sacrificing to idols. That doesn't make sense, but it's all about subjectiveness. So this is what you want to do. There is no truth. There is no objective divine truth. So it becomes so bad that there isn't even the wisdom anymore. It goes all the way down to the lowest plane, to the total immorality. And that's when you're ready to kill people for not serving what you're serving, and kill people for being who they are because they remind you of the truth of divinity. And unfortunately, I mean, we've seen it not in modern history as well. We've seen a cultured, smart nation like the Germans, very cultured. The Nazis were very cultured people, very wise people, very scheduled people, very into discipline. And when you don't have that divinity in it, it descended into killings, mass exterminations. This is what happens when you don't have that divinity in the wisdom, when wisdom is reliant on just my intelligence and what I think.
Wow.
And yeah, and the way that we combat it is we look for that cruse of oil, that pure cruse of oil. And that's what they did. They looked for this pure cruse of oil. And, you know, when we think about it, they could have easily said, look, we're in a situation where we just got back we just fought and we just defeated them. We just got back the Beit HaMikdash. So it won't be that beautiful cruse of oil. You know, we'll light it with an oil that has been defiled, an oil that is not been wrapped and sealed and have all this hashgacha on it. Let's just do regular. But they said, no. We're lighting the menorah. We want the menorah to be pure because we're so used to that defilement, that taking that wisdom and defiling it, bringing it down, bringing it into such negativity. We want the pureness, the pure truth. We want it to be really pure. And that's why they were insistent to look for it. And God responded in kind. You're so insistent to do it the right way, even beyond what you need to do. So I'll respond in kind. And God made the miracle that it lasted longer than it would have ever lasted. It lasted for 8 days until they were able to actually make some more of that pure cruse of oil. And this is as well, we say the word Chanukah also comes, it means inauguration, like Chanukah Habayit, the inauguration, because they re-inaugurated the temple, they re-inaugurated it, they finally had access to it. But also in the word Chanukah, we also have the word chinuch, which is education. And we learned something about education, that the way that we should educate our children and ourselves is with that pureness, with that no compromiseness, with that feeling of I'm not going to compromise. And all the more so when a child is young, if you look at a tree, you know, when the tree is just a little seed before it even becomes a tree, and you cut a nick in it, or when you look at the sapling, that little tree that's growing before you, and you cut you cut through it, you nick it, it's going to affect it terribly. When you look at a grown tree, you know, a big tree outside that's 100 years old, you put a little nick in it, it doesn't do any damage. But that young tree is so impressionable, it's so important that has that pureness, it's raised in a pure way. And this teaches us about chinuch, about education, how important it is specifically with the young children to raise them in a way that there's not this compromise, but this pureness, rather than little here, a little there, compromising this way or that way, a little subjectivity about what I'm thinking, rather than what is God's will and the divine will in this. So this is really the message of Chanukah, to shine our lights despite the darkness around us. Specifically as women, we were the impetus for the miracles. We were the one that caused the miracles. We were the ones that were there. We look at the lights of Chanukah. We're not supposed to use the lights of Chanukah, right? You're not supposed to if you need to light another candle from it, if anyone smokes cigarettes, you're not supposed to use the candles. No, not anymore. You're not supposed to, if there's a blackout, you're not supposed to use the candles of Chanukah to read your book or whatever. You light other candles, or you put on your flashlights. But we don't use the lights of Chanukah because we look at them as this pureness, that we're doing it just for the mitzvah. We're not doing it for our subjectivity, for what we need. We're doing it just for the mitzvah, just for the divine wisdom, just because this is what God wants of us, because this is exactly what the Greeks did not want us to do. They said, sure, you can light candles, but don't do it because God wants you to do it. And we say, these candles we're not going to use for ourselves, but this is just for no reason at all other than that. This is what God wants of us. And in our own lives, this is something that we can apply, that we can just take something that we do in our day and we say, I'm just doing this. This is for you, God. I'm doing this just for you because this is what you want of me. Not for my own enjoyment, not for my own personal thing. This little thing, this one's for you. This one's for you, God. And if we can do that, we have really absorbed the message of Chanukah. If we can stand tall and proud as Jewish people, we've absorbed the message of Chanukah. If we can stand tall and proud despite the difficulties or challenges that we personally are undergoing, we've absorbed the message and the meaning of what Chanukah is all about.
Wow.